Yo, Elder Scrolls God here. It's been a while. I was feeling quite under the weather. Had a nasty case of rock joint. It just would not go away. But I'm feeling a lot better. I visited a priest of the 9 Divines. I'm feeling a lot better now. They gave me some healing magic. That shit was quite needed. So yeah, I'm on the recovery. Things are going well. Back to work. And I thought, what a better way to spend my time. My free time. Now I'm feeling all better and everything. What a better way to spend my time than talking about Talos. Talos, the man, the myth, the legend, we all love him. Some of us may hate him. Hey, I don't judge. You know who did judge, though, was Talos. Talos was probably, well, not even probably, he was quite the judger. He made a lot of judgments in his life. Some may have been good, some may have been bad. But ultimately, they led to his deification. But I'm getting way too ahead of myself. First of all, what's up, guys? It's Elder Scrolls God here. Coming back at you with another video. Another deep Elder Scrolls lore dive, discussion, exposition, whatever you want to call it. Basically, I'm just going to sit here and talk about really weird Elder Scrolls stuff until I get too tired and decide to go in and go to sleep. But hopefully you guys enjoy this video, because this is going to be a really cool one. We're going to be talking quite in depth about the kind of the end of the reign of Talos, or Tiber Septim, as you know. And then basically we're going to just talk about that really quickly and then jump right into the fun stuff, where he becomes Talos the God. So, yep. Elder Scrolls God again, that's me. If you're a first-time viewer, welcome to the channel. If you are a second or third-time viewer, I really only have 2 videos up right now. Welcome back to the channel. This will be a part 2, a continuation of the Talos explaining Talos video. And without further ado, let's get right into it. So I believe where we left off in the last video, Tiber Septim had just conquered the Somerset Isles using the Numidium, which was being powered by Wolfarth and Zernarctus. So he conquers the Somerset Isles, and in doing so, has now completely conquered the entire continent of Tamriel and brought it under one imperial rule. And he is now basically the sole emperor and the ruler of an entirely united Tamriel. And this is a huge, huge, huge deal. This has never, ever happened in the history of Tamriel. And Tamriel, I guess you could argue the last time that Tamriel was technically united, and this is a huge technically, or maybe not even it's a hypothetical. It really is a hypothetical, because it all plays into the fact, or the theory, of whether or not you believe that Aldmeris, the original ancestor homeland of the old Elnathe, which became later the Elves, is whether or not you believe that old Aldmeris is just Tamriel itself, and the act of the sundering. You hear a lot the reference to the sundering of Aldmeris as being the event that basically doomed the elves, the races of elves. So a lot of people, you envision kind of a separate place, this Aldmeris, this continent, this absolute serenity, and the just being so much better. Tamriel just being such a inferior place to be, according to these elves, who basically were just used to paradise and plucked out of the Garden of Eden and chucked onto, you know, regular plain old Tamriel. But if you subscribe to the theory, I think the first time I heard about it was from Drew, who used to be a part of Fudge Muppet, who now has his own channel, Drew Mora. You should definitely go check out both of those channels if you haven't before. That's kind of where I got a lot of my inspiration for all this from. But yeah, he brought forth the theory from the first time I heard about it. He brought forth the theory that Altmaris is basically Tamriel is Altmaris, and the sundering of the elves was the splitting, like, you know, the split off of all the different cultures of elves, which then became pretty much their own separate races, I guess, because you have the high elves and that high elven culture, which is pretty much the closest you could get to the old Elnafey, or, you know, the previous kind of that Aldmaris style of living. And so that's where, like, the high elves were. And at first, the high elves were kind of this much larger group, still a lot more like their old Elnafey, where I believe they called themselves something specific. Yeah, oh yeah, so whereas the high elves call themselves the Altmer, the original, like, elven group on Tamriel was like the Aldmer. I know it's just like one letter, but it is quite a significant difference, because the Aldmer was kind of this like a conglomeration of mortal elves, and you have some outliers like the Bosmer and the Snow Elves and Dwemer as well. There's no real concrete answer as to whether or not they were originally from this great, like, Aldmer group. But one group that we do know that split off, you know, indefinitely was the Chimer, who later became the Dunmer. And their whole story for splitting off is really awesome, and I could probably go over that in another video. But that would be an evidence of sundering, from that perspective of the sundering being the splitting of the elven ideals. Another one, which is also an even deeper kind of look, is like the orcs, maybe possibly, if you believe their origin story is when it kind of intertwines with the Chimer origin story of them being Trinimac worshippers of Aldmer heritage, who, upon Trinimac's corruption and becoming Malakath, I think the quote is like something like they rubbed the excrement all over themselves and became like the orcs. I know that probably sounds really crazy out of context, and with the context, it's pretty much just as crazy. But if you're ever curious about that, I'll talk about it in a video sometime later. But you should look up you should look up Saint Veloth and just stuff about the early Chimer and the Exodus to Resdain. All that stuff, really, really cool. Boethia has kind of a duel with Trinimac, kind of outsmarts Trinimac, and it's really, really, really cool, weird lore stuff. But I've been getting completely sidetracked. But yeah, we got to get back to Talos. So he's just conquered Tamriel, which, what I think I was trying to stress in the beginning is that's like a really huge deal, because like no one's ever done it before. But right, so he's done it, and now he's just like sitting there around Emperor of Tamriel, and I'm sure, you know, there was unrest and quelling all these different cultures and kingdoms and rulers and things. Probably was no easy task, I could imagine. But it's not like it's just Tiber Septim. Like, you have to imagine he has, first of all, the Imperial Council, which arguably handles more of the day-to-day affairs of the Emperor, especially within the Imperial City and the Cyrodiil itself. but they would also handle, you know, just affairs, probably more of that nature, whereas Tiber Septim himself, I would imagine he would be more as, you know, he'd show up for like dinners and balls and diplomacy type things, you know, keeping up appearances and things of that nature at this point. But yeah, he has, I'm not sure, he has a kid, obviously. I don't remember the child's name at this point. I might come back to that, do a little research and come back to that. But yeah, so he basically, he rules over this unified Tamriel, but I don't really care about any of that anymore. There's nothing really that I saw that I want to talk about. So he rules over Tamriel. He lives a great life, you know, and he passes away. It's the Third Era, because he founded the Third Era. So in the previous video I had gotten it wrong. He was actually like alive during the Second Era, and he founded the Third Era with his new empire. And so he dies pretty early into the Third Era, you know, as an old man. And here's where things get just completely, absolutely bonkers. Before we get really into the video, guys, I just wanted to do a quick stop, brief word from a sponsor. For those of you who don't know, I frequent Riften quite often. Like, you know, I'll just go there and just hang out. It's a pretty cool, chill spot. There was this guy hanging around the market recently, and he was, I don't know, he was setting up shop, and I was just kind of looking around. I was talking to Brand Shea about it. Brand Shea didn't seem to like the guy too much, but I'm not from there, I guess, originally. I just kind of hang out there, so I was poking around a little bit, and I overheard him one day, and he's selling genuine Falmer blood elixir. Now, I've never been able to get my hands on, like, the real stuff before. It's, like, very hard to come by genuine Falmer blood elixir, you know. All those knockoffs, dude, they have such horrible side effects. Like, I can't get over the last case of brain rot, dude. That was so awful. It's just, you know, the constant rotting, dude. I just could not handle it. But yeah, this stuff apparently genuine, like, dude, do you know how hard that is to find these days? Genuine Falmer blood elixir. Like, what? He just goes into some cave. Like, I'm supposed to go into some cave, and, you know, what do I have? Some sort of, like, tap that I put in? Like, I'm, you know, getting sap out of a tree. I'm getting fucking blood out of a Falmer. But yeah, anyways, guys, I just wanted to give I think he told me his name. Oh, was it Brandendorf? Oh, again, no. Brynjolf. Yeah, that was it. Brynjolf. Yeah, Brynjolf. So yeah, quick shout out to my boy Brynjolf. Go check out his stand in Riften. It's like right next to the beggar. You can't miss it. And yeah, he's got that genuine Falmer blood elixir. So yeah, just a quick shout out to him. Real quick thank you. Yeah. Anyways, let's get right into the video, folks. So we've got quite a bit to talk about. I figured the best way to go about it is I'm going to basically just talk about each theory as I go. So I won't give you like a broad list. I'm just going to kind of start spitballing theories and explaining them as I go, and I'll try my best to stay on topic for each theory. So starting off, we'll do the canon theory, the most popular theory, and this is like the in lore. I'm talking like canon and all that. Like, this is what most Tamrielic people would tell you about the god Talos. So, upon Tiber Septim's death as Emperor of the Unified Tamriel, and again being a Dragonborn, so a true Emperor and having his own righteous bloodline, fulfilling the pact with Akatosh. Upon his death, he ascended to the realm of the gods because of his deeds in the mortal life. So basically, if you think about it, most people who worship or just believe in Talos basically believe that he was such a badass in life that he just became a god when he died. Now, there are examples of mortals becoming major deities. Like, I think I might have talked about RK in the last video, but RK was basically, I believe he was a mortal merchant or shopkeeper or something of that nature. And just, he did a whole bunch of righteous stuff, and he ascended, he was brought up to the plains of gods by Mara, I believe. I think it was Mara who ascended him to become RK. And so there is a huge thing in Elder Scrolls when it comes to deities specifically. And that's the idea that deities basically, their influence is extremely important in the Elder Scrolls. Like, how much influence a deity has basically is directly linked to their power. So, like, if you have, like, I guess if you go back to, like, the days of Daggerfall, and you have gods like Ebenarm, Raven, Ebenarm, and, just some other random gods that are just not talked about anymore, the way you can kind of view that in lore is that these gods, their worship has gone out of practice in Tamriel, and so the literal beings themselves have basically either grown so weak or have just faded out of existence entirely because they no longer have influence on Tamriel. And so that's like a whole big thing with the idea of Talos, is like, yeah, like, people believe that because he was so great and his actions were so prolific and just insane in life, and so many people worshipped and revered and loved him. I mean, you remember going back to when he was first coronated, and he's giving this speech with, his throat slit, and it's only a whisper, but people are still, like, moved to, like, tears, and people really, really, really loved Tiber Septim. Like, he was quite the popular emperor, from my understanding. And maybe, the stories tell it different than how it was, but it seems to be that he was quite the popular guy. So it's very possible that upon his death, because he was already so basically worshipped at this point already, that he was able to transcend the mortal cycle and become Talos, god of men. And that is a really, really, like, interesting theory, because, like I said, it does really play into really heavily the idea, and I don't even think it's really an idea. Maybe, I don't know if it's a theory. I don't know if it's specifically, like, canon, the idea that worship is directly linked to, like, influence and just power in general. Because I know that is quite specific. Like, it definitely influences the Aedra. And we can see it used to explain retcons, like with Ebenarm and stuff like that. The Daedra, I believe, are not as impacted, although that I'm not quite sure of. They could be just as impacted by worship. But a really cool tie-in to, like, the whole, like, Talos and worship thing is there's some out of lore texts regarding the Thalmor, because everyone knows the Thalmor absolutely hate Talos and are trying to basically get rid of him. But the way they're doing that is by banning and outlawing his worship across all of Tamriel, or everywhere they basically can. And obviously it's led to quite a lot of upheaval, especially with, Skyrim being in a whole civil war basically over Talos worship being outlawed. But if you look at it with that lens of, like, worship and influence on Tamriel directly influencing the god itself, then it makes a lot of sense that maybe the Thalmor are kind of in on that. Like, they know about that at the very least, maybe, and they're directly trying to eliminate Talos worship to directly eliminate Talos the god himself. And so that's like a really cool, like, theory. I like that one a lot. All right, at least I like the parts of it that are, you know, that have to do with the warship, and the cool parts with like the Thalmor and all that. However, I don't really buy in, unlike the Nords and Heimskr and all those guys, I don't really fall for the whole idea that Talos was just so great in life that he just became a god. Because there's so many other, like, think about like Ysgramor, or you think about like Nerevar, or just all these other prolific figures in history, like Shalador, all these other heroes, you know. And I know Tiber Septim is so much different because, you know, uniting Tamriel. But yeah, there's just so many heroes throughout history in Tamriel that I don't buy into the fact that that's what made Talos so powerful. Because I could see, like, you know, Ysgramor and all those guys that giving into that theory, kind of, they could technically be seen as like kind of deified in a way, and maybe even by some people they are deified. Nerevar maybe a lot more than maybe someone like Ysgramor or something. That's more of like in spirit. But, you know, like, Talos is quite literally a god and a presence. Like, he is the 9th divine. That's not a title that's thrown around so easily. So, in my personal opinion, I don't buy into the idea that that's necessarily where Talos, the god, came from. So now you may be asking yourself, well, Elder Scrolls God, where do you think Talos came from? Well, I'll tell you, goddammit. But it's not going to be so simple. You know, this is really where the nitty-gritty stuff, I'm going to be kind of going off on a bunch of different tangents and stuff. So bear with me, if you will. If you've made it this far, you know, you probably don't mind my ramblings that much anyways. So, going a little ways back to when Tiber Septim, before he had fully conquered Tamriel, if you remember, once he assimilated Morrowind, they very specifically, the way he had assimilated Morrowind was through a treaty with the Tribunal, who was, you know, the ruling power of Morrowind at the time, and not a power to be so easily trifled with, as although their connection to the Heart of Lorkhan was kind of, I guess, you know, like severed temporarily with the presence of Dagoth and everything like that, they still were like godlike, you know. They were demigods, or human, you know, mortal gods. It's very, very weird and hard to describe, but if you can imagine, they were gods who could also walk the mortal plane. So, you know, Tiber Septim at this time, like I said, he's a man, but, you know, the rest of the Dunmer people, they were not gods, so the Tribunal didn't really want to, it would probably hurt their image. They liked the idea of being like the ruling powers of Morrowind. And, you know, playing back into that idea I was kind of just talking about, with worship being quite a powerful thing, it would make sense that they would kind of, you know, at the very least enjoy having the worship of Morrowind. So they don't really want all their people getting slaughtered, especially when the Heart of Lorkhan is not really accessible at this point, because they would have to go back and make pilgrimages to kind of keep their power going. And so when Tiber Septim pulled up and he starts talking about war, and they've seen what he's capable of, this new empire is capable of. So, like I said before, they signed the peace treaty, and the major condition of that is Tiber Septim is gifted the Numidium. And going back again to what I said, Zurin Arctis, Tiber Septim's battle mage and, you know, good friend or whatever, basically discovered that the Numidium needed a power source, so he builds what's known as the Mantella. And I just kind of glazed over the Mantella in the last video, but now I want to talk about it a little bit more. This is when we can start referencing some really crazy, deep, weird stuff. So, like, the Mantella, you could basically imagine it as this giant, if for those of you who like haven't seen pictures of it or anything, It's basically this giant green gem. I mean, it's said to be akin to like a giant soul gem. So like, you know, but it's like got this green kind of emerald shine to it. It's really, really cool. It's like you see it in Daggerfall. It plays a huge role, and all this kind of stuff is, a lot of it comes from that Daggerfall era of lore, which is really cool because that old lore just had all that, you know, that basement writer stuff in it. You know, you could tell these guys really had the passion for sure. And yeah, so you actually, the Mantella plays a huge role in the game Daggerfall, because one of your main goals as the player character is to find the Mantella and activate the Numidium, again, just like Tiber Septim did. And it leads to some really crazy events like the end game, and it's kind of cool how they it was basically an in-game mechanic. They wanted to make sure that no player felt like their ending was underrepresented in the next game. So they wrote in the lore the idea of the dragon breaks, where basically a very, very convoluted topic, but basically the idea is that time itself as a structure breaks in fractures into multiple different contradictory timelines. And the whole idea of the dragon aspect of the dragon break is the association with Akatosh being the god of time. So it's almost like the representation of Akatosh breaking, or in some, depending on some cases, you can look at it as Akatosh, the mad god, because you see, you know, people will talk about the mad Akatosh, or the Akatusk, the many-headed Akatosh, or many-headed Talos, I believe that is, but that's a little bit of a spoiler, I guess, you know. But yeah, it's just the idea that the time breaks, but then it does repair itself in a way that pretty much everything from every timeline that happened is all coexistently true, which leads to a lot of contradictions and really weird stuff. Like, there was a famous example is the Middle Dawn, which was like 1,000-year dragon break, and no one can to this day can really remember what happens. They have all these different kind of jumbled memories, that some of the memories don't feel like their own, but they can't tell their own from other people's. And the only real entity that, or I guess, yeah, entity that was aware of what was going on, and the only reason that we know about it, is the red diamond itself, which possessed kind of the souls, it's an oversoul of all the previous emperors who wore the Amulet of Kings. So they were kind of being outside of time, were able to retell the events as best they could. And some crazy stuff happened, like apparently Cyrodiil turned into an egg and also conquered the stars maybe at another point. And just all sorts of, you know, wild, absolutely bonkers stuff was going down. So when you find the Mantella in Daggerfall and you activate the Numidium, then a bunch of crazy stuff happens. So this Mantella is basically kind of on a similar scale, if not the same scale, to the Heart of Lorkhan itself. Most likely a similar scale, probably not more powerful, I would assume, because the Heart of Lorkhan is kind of the progenitor, the main source of the Numidium's power initially. And the conditions for activating that had much more drastic consequences than just a dragon break, being the disappearance of the entire Dwemer race, and then later the ascension of the Tribunal. So the Mantella, when you find it in Daggerfall, it's in like an outer realm of Aetherius, which is actually kind of cool, because the outer realms, like, you know, when you think of like pocket dimensions and other realms of, like, you know, I guess reality and stuff like that in the Elder Scrolls, normally your mind turns towards like Daedric realms, like the different planes of oblivion. You know, we've seen, you know, Cold Harbor and all the ones in ESO, and the Deadlands in Oblivion, and Skyrim showed you Apocrypha and stuff. But there's also Aetherius, and there are different planes within Aetherius as well. Some are a very well-known one, which is also in Skyrim, would be Sovngarde, which is a pocket plane of existence within Aetherius. And most likely the other afterlives, like the Far Shores for the Redguards and the sands behind the stars for the Khajiit and all, you know, those would all presumably be real places in Aetherius as well, like actual corporeal, like, afterlives that spirits would go to. So yeah, the Mantella is found in a place, it's called the Mantellan Crux, and it's just kind of this like pocket dimension in the middle of nowhere in Aetherius. And it's just this like empty pocket of space that has within it the Mantella, this giant skull with these rings around it, and it's missing one eye, and in its eye that's missing, Sheogorath is there, and you can talk to him. That to me is just like the coolest thing ever. I've done as much research as I could find, which there really is not much on that like giant skull thing, and like it's referenced as the blind god in Elder Scrolls lore, if you're ever curious to look it up. But from what I've like heard about it, there's no real concrete answer to who it may be. A lot of I've seen one of the biggest theories is that it's Magnus, referencing the fact that the Eye of Magnus in Skyrim. But I kind of, you know, I'm not really sure about that, because I feel like they weren't thinking about you know, the plot of Skyrim and the lore of Skyrim at that time. So I don't know if the Eye of Magnus was really a concept at that point. It could be. I don't know. I'm not really sure. But you know, it's just there's not really much about this like blind god, and I kind of makes it even more cool. Like, I love that about it. Like, there's just no information really. You just see it. It's like in the game though, so it's canon. It's not, but there's just no information about what it is or where it comes from. But anyways, yeah, you go to the Mantellan Crux and you retrieve the Mantella, and you, using the Totem of Tiber Septim, reclaim the Numidium and activate the Heart of Lorkhan. I mean, the Numidium, sorry. So yeah. So like, how is that possible? Like, why does the Mantella work as a substitute for the Heart of Lorkhan? Because if you remember, the Mantella is pretty much just a giant soul gem, but the souls within it are Wolfarth, the Ash King, Ysmir Wolfarth, I mean, you know, he is like known to be a Shezarene, which, if you remember, a Shezarene is a mortal avatar of Lorkhan, or Shazar, or Shor, or whatever you want to call him. So he's basically like an avatar of Lorkhan. So I guess he kind of technically like is Lorkhan in mortal form. So that's one soul in there that could kind of explain it, but it's still really powerful. And Zurin Arctis, if you remember, also is in the Mantella. Now here's where things get interesting. I don't think it's ever explicitly like said outright, but I believe that Zurin Arctis is indeed also a Shezarene. it would make a lot of sense because, you know, the Mantella works. Like, the Numidium was able to be activated, maybe not to the same scope as it had with the Heart of Lorcan, but at the very least it, like, worked as a substitute. The Mantella worked with the souls of Zurin Arctus and Wolfarth in there. So that's really, really, really crucial, really important for the overarching grand narrative of Talos the God. Because Talos, or Tiber Septim, was also in that room when Zurin Arctus and Wolfarth, like, killed each other simultaneously and were absorbed into the Mantella. He was there as well. And, you know, he didn't really participate in it, but that kind of event happening, it almost, it's implied to have kind of, you know, it's the Elder Scrolls. There's always some, like, weird, like, kind of mystery around events and stuff. So it's not really clear what happened and what the events really were. Like, we initially are led to believe that, yeah, Zurin Arctus had this plan pretty much on his own, and Talos kind of maybe was, like, in on it, but, like, he didn't expect Zurin Arctus to die. But going back to Daggerfall, there's a really important character that's introduced in that game. I believe is introduced in that game, known as the Underking. And I don't know if it's ever clearly stated, because I think I've heard some people say that it's Wolfarth, and that might be referenced in game as well, that it's theorized to be Wolfarth is the Underking. But I go with the idea that it's some, like, fractured version of Zurin Arctus, which I think is also referenced in game, might even be referenced in the book I'm about to talk about, because the Underking has a book called the Arcturian Heresy, which basically puts forth the idea that Tiber Septim was nothing more than a liar, and he deceived everyone, and he, you know, backstabbed his way basically to a unified Tamrielic empire, where he became the sole ruler. And so that, obviously, it's a heretical text, because it talks quite ill about the now deified Talos. But it brings up a lot of interesting points. And, you know, it's really interesting, like, to think that maybe this is kind of a representation of Zurin Arctus in some way coming back and, like, you know, sneaking in through the cracks of time to tell his version of the story of Talos. But yeah, guys, we're gonna have to wrap it up. Video's getting pretty damn long, and there's still a lot more to talk about. The next part 3, we're going to start talking about the Arcturian Heresy. We're going to start talking about Zurin Arctus a lot more, Tiber Septim and Wolfarth also, and their connection. The 3 of them are going to be very important for the aptly titled Part 3. So, thank you guys so much for watching. Yeah. I'm Elder Scrolls God. Wherever you are, have a great night.